When you think of a cow, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably just a quiet animal munching on grass in a field, right? Well, today, we're going to peek behind that simple picture. We're going to use 3 totally different lenses to explore a world you might never have even imagined existed. So, let's get into it.
What if that calm, placid animal we're all so used to seeing, what if that's just the tip of the iceberg? What if there's a whole story underneath that? Science, intuition, and even spirituality are all starting to tell in ways that are, frankly, surprisingly similar. I mean, think about it. The ability to remember a specific person's face, to actually feel joy, to figure out a puzzle, and even to form these really deep friendships. What if there's this incredibly complex inner life going on right under our noses?
And what if that inner world connects to something even bigger? A level of awareness and sensitivity that kind of challenges us to see them in a whole new way. Okay, first up, let's ground ourselves in what modern science is actually discovering. Because researchers, they're moving past some really old assumptions, and honestly, the results are completely rewriting the story of the cow.
And this stuff is just fascinating. We're seeing real evidence that cows have long-term memories, that they form best friends, and yep, they avoid other cows they don't like. They even show something scientists call cognitive bias, which is basically a fancy way of saying they can be optimistic or pessimistic depending on how they're feeling. This tells us they aren't just a mindless herd, they're a complex society of individuals. And this right here points to some real emotional depth. When a cow solves a problem, say figuring out how to open a gate to get a treat, it doesn't just, walk through. They have this visible, joyful reaction. It's a genuine eureka moment. That's the thrill of discovery, an emotion every single one of us can recognize.
And their entire experience is really shaped by how we act around them. It's pretty straightforward. Gentle handling, you get calm, trusting animals. But rough treatment creates a deep-seated fear that they remember for a long, long time. It shows their emotional state is often just a direct mirror of how they're being treated.
So the huge takeaway from the scientific view is this. That old idea of the passive, simple farm animal, it's a total myth. The reality is that we're looking at a sentient being with a rich inner world of thoughts, feelings, and really complex social relationships. Okay, let's shift gears now to our next lens and see how this all builds. Now we're stepping just beyond what's been peer-reviewed and into the world of interspecies communication. And look, while it's not scientifically proven in the traditional sense, the patterns that show up are pretty compelling, especially when you put them right next to the science.
So what is this exactly? Well, people who practice this describe it as a way of kind of tuning in to an animal's point of view directly. It's not through words, but through a totally different kind of language.
This language is said to work through feelings and pictures. Think of it like different channels on a radio. An animal might send a mental image, like a picture of a water trough to say it's thirsty, or a wave of anxiety to show it's stressed, or even a physical sensation of warmth to show it feels safe.
And pretty much across the board, communicators report that cows are incredibly sensitive and grounded beings. They often talk about this kind of shared emotional field in the herd, where the stress or panic of just one cow can literally ripple out and affect everybody else.
And this is where it gets really interesting, right? This idea of a shared emotional field, well, it lines up perfectly with what scientists observe. Entire herds synchronizing their behavior, all eating or resting at the same time, and responding to the emotional tone of their handlers. It seems like these two very different ways of knowing are pointing in the exact same direction. For our final lens, we're going to turn to a spiritual perspective. A view where cows aren't just seen as intelligent or sensitive, but as beings that hold a profound spiritual significance. In some spiritual teachings, like those from Supreme Master Ching Hai, beings are understood by their spiritual qualities. In one assessment, cows were evaluated on this kind of scale. And what's just incredible here is the total absence of any negative quality, not a single bit. Instead, you see these incredibly high levels of goodness, saintliness, and positive energy. So, in this worldview, cows are seen as these gentle souls, almost naturally aligned with goodness. They're not just animals, they are friends, helpers on this shared journey we're all on, beings considered pure and, as it's put, heaven's beloved. It's a perspective of just deep reverence and respect.
So, we've looked through 3 very, very different lenses. We've got science, communication, and spirituality. Now let's bring it all into focus and see what kind of picture emerges when we put them all together. Whether we use the language of data and observation, the language of intuition, or the language of the spirit, we keep arriving at the exact same truth. Cows are beings of remarkable depth, awareness, and sensitivity.
And this brings us to the most important question of all. With all this understanding, maybe the focus shifts. Maybe the question isn't what are cows anymore. Maybe the real question is, how do we choose to see them? And that question isn't just for scientists or mystics. It's for every single one of us.
And the choice is pretty stark when you lay it out. Do we see them as objects in a landscape, or as individual lives? As just part of the background scenery, or as fellow beings sharing this planet with us? Ultimately, all three of these lenses, science, communication, and spirituality, they all give us a chance to see more clearly. And maybe, just maybe, that clarity is the very first step toward a more compassionate relationship with these gentle, incredible animals. Because sometimes, seeing clearly, that's where compassion begins.